Hi there everyone, and welcome to Nutri's NutriClean programme webinar with Jo Gamble. My name's Sarah and I'm going to be here for the duration of the webinar to help with any queries or problems. Please feel free to use the chat tool, which is located bottom left of the screen, to ask any questions you may have. Questions or comments can be made at any point over the course of the webinar, but will only be answered at the end. Anything you write is viewable by everyone unless you click on private chat, and I'll now pass you over to Jo. Thank you, Jo.
Thanks, Sarah, and good morning to everybody, and a Happy New Year to you all. Well, what a great opportunity to start the new year with this fantastic NutriClean program. I'm sure many of you are sitting there feeling a little bit stagnant, maybe after overindulging on that festive food, or maybe a little too much of that red wine over the festive period. But now is your opportunity to make changes, not just to you, but also is this the opportunity to detox your clinics as well. Be thinking about what you do want for 2015 moving forward. What are your goals from a health perspective, an emotional perspective, a work perspective, a family perspective? And what not better way to start the year by starting this group program. For those of you that have never done one of our group programs before, I'm sure by the end of the time that we spend together, you will be fully committed to our programs. Not just because of the benefits that you'll get from your own personal health, because obviously during this period we are cleaning out our own bodies, but also the effects of working together as a group. The Facebook groups that we run throughout these programs have been so successful. This is our 5th NutriClean program, and I'm so proud to be a part of each and every one of them. So we're a week away from starting. So if those fridges are still full of that little bit of food that you think, maybe I shouldn't be eating that, this is your week to make sure that you get them cleaned out. What about that alcohol? If there's any leftovers that have been moved out of the house yet? Or maybe over the last week you might finish off that last little bit of red wine. So what we're going to be covering today is what is toxicity and does it affect me? What is a metabolic detoxification and do I need one? Then we're going to be talking about preparing for 14 days of cleaning out, taking measurements and pre-detox questionnaires, how will I incorporate the program into my working life, and also thinking beyond food. So today may have been your first day back at work, or the children's first day back at school, or your husband's first day back at work and you're left at home. So this is our opportunity to be thinking about, okay, what are we going to be doing over the next 3 weeks together? And what preparation do we need to put in place to make sure that runs as smoothly as possible? So first of all, we need to be thinking about what is toxicity. Well, it's any substance or substances or environmental influence that disturbs the metabolism in a manner that results in chronic illness. Toxins come from the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the food that we eat. Now, it's impossible to eliminate all toxins from our environment. We'd have to live in a bubble for that to happen. In fact, I was only speaking to one of my clients last week who suffers with an immunodeficiency disease, and we talked about having to put her in a little bubble just to keep her nice and healthy. But that's not realistic for the majority of us, is it? The majority of us do walk outside and breathe in the air. We do drink water that might not always be from the most reputable of sources. What really is in the tap water that we're drinking, or cooking or food in, or washing our food in, or washing ourselves and our hair and our clothes in? And what about the food that we eat? It's almost impossible in some areas, not in others, to get 100% organic food. How many of you have actually made that commitment to starting to eat organic food? I know where I live, I try and feed my daughter at the very utmost organic food, and I reckon I've got her diet to about 95%. That last 5% has proved really, really difficult, just because food's not necessarily available, or from eating outside of the house, etc., etc. But then, you know, really reflect back on your diet and think how much food is coming in from a source that is not necessarily the cleanest of sources. So let's think about chief causes of chronic disease. Inappropriate food choices, lack of physical activity, poor sleep, tobacco and alcohol use, and poor mental resiliency, so toxic stress. So let's break those down in a bit more detail. Inappropriate food choices. Does that come down to lack of planning? Does that come down to, well, I've just got to pop into the local supermarket and grab a sandwich that's got actually way too many white carbohydrates in there, barely any protein in there, and if it has come from an animal source, it's not likely to be organic. What about the margarine that's spread on the bread? And what about the plastic container that it's wrapped in? How much toxins are you going to take on board from that? And that's as opposed to not being organized enough to, let's say, take your lunch to work with you. Lack of physical activity. We're very, very stagnant nowadays. How many people, and I'm going to put my hand up and feel quite guilty about this. I drive my daughter to school every day, so I get out the house, I get in the car that's on the drive, I drive to her school, I let her get out the car, I drive to work, I park around the back of my building, and I walk about 20 steps into my building. And then I can do it all in reverse. So unless I make the effort to actually go get on my walking shoes and go for a walk, then can I go day after day after day without truly moving? How many of you feel in that position? Poor sleep. How many of you get in your 8 hours of good quality sleep a night? Tobacco and alcohol use, maybe over the festive period, a bit too much alcohol going in there. And what about toxic stress? This is the opportunity not just to detox your body, but also to detox your mind, detox your office. What else needs clearing out? So the end result of that environment that most of us are living in is an overconsumption of calories, too many of the wrong kind of macronutrients, so those refined carbohydrates, your white breads, white potatoes, white pasta, white rice, biscuits, crisps, etc., trans fatty acids, too much saturated fat, and an insufficient amount of micronutrients. Count up how many portions of fruit and vegetables that you ate yesterday. Did you reach the 5 a day recommended by the government? But yet, as nutritional therapists, we know that's nowhere near enough. Did you reach the 7 to 9 portions, which is more ideal? Or did you make it to the 12 plus portions a day? So let's just look at some of these conditions associated with toxicity. How many people, how many of those that you're in practice actually see people walking into your office with these conditions on a regular basis? I know I see people who are obese all of the time. Metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, cancers, that's an area that I specialize in, so I see that day in and day out. Autoimmune diseases, well, that's another area that's very close to my heart. Reproductive disorders, how many clients are you seeing with infertility? What about neurodegenerative diseases? The rise in Parkinson's and Alzheimer's is scarily, going up. Autism, that's another one that I do a lot of work with and see numerous people walking through my door with. So if we look at some of those nutrient insufficiencies and chronic diseases, just look here on the right-hand side. These are the minerals, vitamins and minerals associated with, or deficiency in these vitamins and minerals associated with these high diseases that we're seeing day in and day out. So maybe we need to put more effort on getting those essential vitamins and minerals in through the food that we're eating. And if we're not meeting it through food, then do we need to be looking at supplementation? So why might we be toxic? Toxic exposure, somewhat outside of our control, like I said. You've only got to walk outside and inhale secondhand tobacco smoke, car exhaust fumes. You might live by power stations or something that's pumping something out into the environment that you're working in. Yeah, where do you work? Do you work with toxic products? Are your clients, are your partners? Genetic predisposition changes the way we deal with chemicals, compounds, and hormones. And we're going to talk about this a few times throughout our 3 seminars together. So this is what we're demonstrating here on the right-hand side. What we're looking at here is the cytochrome P450 pathways, and we're thinking about, do us or do our clients, do our partners, children, families have genetic polymorphisms of any of the pathways? So let's take here, this red blob here represents that pathway has a genetic polymorphism. So the CYP1A1 pathway is involved in the breaking down of estrogens, as is the CYP1B1. So you can see this individual that I've snapshot their results from has a problem with breaking down estrogens through both of these pathways. So therefore, we want to be thinking about where would this client come into contact with estrogens from the outside environment. Could it be through the water supply? There's more estrogen in the water supply to the point that frogs and fish are feminizing. Is that not worrying, and they're now capable of having babies? What about hormone-like substances that they could be coming into contact with from the outside environment, things like BPA? Are you encouraging your clients, or are you actively encouraging yourself not to drink from plastic water bottles or use plastic containers? Chicken and eggs, are we making sure we advise that they are organic to minimize exposure to hormones? So, when we know what our cells or our clients have with regard to our genetics, then we can maybe work a bit more specifically with our toxic burden. So I don't know if any of you have ever tested yourself or tested any of your clients, but I see that as a really important part of my clinical work. What about the higher exposure to exogenous toxins, the bigger the burden, the potential stressed organs? And the balance between exposure and detoxification is absolutely key. What about heavy metal toxicity? Do you know what heavy metals that you've got in your body? You can see this client here that I've been doing some work with. Her level of arsenic, which incidentally is carcinogenic, is more than 444. That is scarily high. Where did she get that from? Maybe we need to dig a little bit deeper. But we are more than our genes. There's this emerging field of epigenetics. Thanks very much to Dr. Jeffrey Bland, who's put years and years and years of work into the field of epigenetics. We're thinking about how environmental factors mark our genes. The imprint of our genes is passed between generations, and it is believed that it can affect up to 3 generations. So it might not just be what the environment that you've lived in. What about your parents and grandparents and great-grandparents? What about the influence that you could have on your children and your grandchildren? So actually, diet does influence the imprinting of those genes. Diet does impact epigenetics. Is anyone safe? 171 industrial compounds, pollutants, and other chemicals, including chemicals linked to birth defects and developmental delays, immune system toxicity, and an average of 56 carcinogens were found in blood and urine samples of a test sample of volunteers. How scary is that? Are those toxins inside you? Are they inside me? Are they inside our children? Do we want to be working on clearing those toxins out? I certainly do. I'm not happy to have carcinogens sat inside of me. With the rate of cancer at 1 in about 2.8 at the moment and set to double by 2030, surely we want to be doing something about minimizing our risks. Or do we do what so many people do and bury our head in the sand? Here's a paper here on the possible human health effects of environmental contaminants. Cancer's at the top of the list, followed by birth defects, immune system defects, reduced IQ, behavioral abnormalities, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, altered metabolism, decreased fertility, altered sex hormone balance, specific organ dysfunctions. Toxins is so important. Diet contributes to both environmental and natural toxins. Food toxins include petrochemical residues from some farming practices, mercury from industrial waste in fish primarily, so that's why we want to be minimizing exposure to the big fish, lead in the water. What do you do about cleaning out your water? Do you use anything? Do you distill your water? Advanced glycation end products from the preparation of food, and that's particularly important with regards to sort of burning of food, which we also find are polyaromatic hydrocarbons. So we do want to be avoiding charred meat, but not just that, any food. You know, even the slice of toast is a bit blackened around the outside. That is going to have increased advanced glycation end products. Trans fats, that's what keeps the food stable for a much longer period of time. You look at some foods like cakes that are on the market, look at the shelf life on them. I ask you to make your own cake and put it in an airtight container, and then you put a cake that you buy from Tesco's or Sainsbury's or any other reputable supermarket in a same airtight container, and I completely promise you that yours will grow mold way before theirs will. Why? Because of the additives, the trans fats, all of the chemicals that are put in the cakes to give them this long shelf life. And then we've got our naturally occurring plant tannins, our aflatoxins. So what do we preach most commonly about? Yeah, it's those little peanuts, aren't they, that have the potential to spore aflatoxins. But many of the legume family do have that potential. So our toxic total load comes from our xenobiotics, infections, bacterial, fungal, parasitic, and viral. Where's the most common place that you're going to find those bacterial, fungal, and parasitic infections, but yet you may be completely asymptomatic? That's it, in your gut. Think about what's going on in your gut. Have you got a belly full of bacteria? Is that going to pull down your immune system? Is that going to put extra stress on your liver for detoxification? Physical toxins from electromagnetic fields and ionizing radiation. Do you know where your nearest electromagnetic fields are around your house, or your nearest mobile phone masts. There's actually a website that you can log into and put your postcode in there and have a look at how close your nearest mobile phone masts are. Sometimes it's a little bit scary. You might say, well, can't do anything about it, but actually, there's more and more products on the market, even down to things like curtains that protect the electromagnetic fields from coming in from the house. What about personal devices? Does anybody use any personal devices to protect themselves or put anything on their mobile phones? Or, there's many different options out there. What are you doing to protect yourself? Lifestyle, drinking, smoking, being sedentary. Mechanical dysfunction, so it could be a nasal imbalance, so you can't actually get the toxins out, or intestinal imbalance. Hormonal, so could it be too much cortisol? How much stress have you been under of late? Steroids. And then we've got our psychosocial factors, so stress, coping skills, belief systems, trauma. Can you see that toxins go way beyond just what we eat, drink, and breathe in? So how does the body detoxify? Well, we've got various different methods of detoxification. We've got the liver, which is our most prominent detoxification system, but you can't belittle the effects of the bowel. And is the bowel working? If you can't move your bowel, or if your clients aren't moving their bowels, then how are we going to detoxify effectively? Make sure you ask them that question. How often are you having a bowel movement? Because for some people, that is not frequently. I have a bit of a running record going with this when I ask my clients. So I frequently have a client who only has a bowel movement once a week, and to them that's normal, and that's why you never accept the word normal. I then met a lady who went 3 weeks, was regularly having 3-week intervals between bowel movements. I've never seen a tongue look quite so bad as her tongue did. It was black in colour. No wonder her tongue was black. Her bowel was completely stagnant and poisoning her body. And then I came across a lady who, after having a baby, went 6 weeks without a bowel movement. Could you imagine? She said her abdomen swelled to the point it looked like she was fully pregnant again. 6 weeks with no bowel movement. So we absolutely have to be getting that bowel movement. The kidneys are also very significant in detoxification. And don't forget the skin. The skin is actually the biggest organ of detoxification, not necessarily the best, but the biggest. And then we've got the lungs. And are you using your lungs to your full capacity? I just heard you all take a great big breath then and remind yourselves how it feels to use your lungs fully. And yet, I'm sure you'll agree that most of us don't use them to their full capacity. So the liver is the most important detoxifying organ in the body. Given the proper nourishment, the liver is capable of regeneration, both in the building of new tissue and in restoring its ability to detoxify substances. The body's ability to rid itself of toxic substances from the environment is dependent upon proper function of the liver. It's a 2-step process. Well, actually, we now think it's a 3-step process, but we're going to talk about it as in phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 activation of enzymes referred to as cytochrome P450 mixed function oxidases. These enzymes begin the process of transforming toxic substances for excretion. When a substance is biotransformed, it is converted to a new intermediate from which it can be converted once again into a form that is easily excreted. These biotransformed intermediates undergo a second conversion process. Phase 2 involves the combination of the biotransformed intermediate with substances in the liver to make them water-soluble for excretion as non-toxic substances in the urine as bile. There are 8 phase 2 processes, and in order to function optimally, each depends upon the presence of specific nutrients. If the liver can't use the phase 2 pathways, the biotransformed intermediates can accumulate and be more harmful to the body than if no detoxification has occurred. So factors that inhibit P450, so phase 1, slow detoxifiers, lack of macro or micronutrients, high arachidonic acid, so we might find that in red meat, heavy metals, low protein, fasting, grapefruit, and there's an naringin content in that, and that's why we get clients to avoid grapefruit if they're on certain pharmaceutical medications, because we might slow down the processing of that drug. An iron overload, some antidepressants, oral contraceptives, H2 blockers, antihistamines and antifungals, genetic polymorphisms, which are covered in a slight amount of detail, and also viral infections. Things that induce So fast detoxifiers are alcohol and caffeine, charred meats, pesticides, paint and exhaust fumes, tobacco, polycyclic hydrocarbons, medications or certain medications, and herbs including St. John's wort. And again, that's why we don't use St. John's wort while people are on a drug that needs processing down through the P450 pathway, such as the oral contraceptive pill, because then we can over-process that drug. And that wouldn't be good for a client that you're wanting to use it for contraception purposes. This diagram here just gives it you in a little bit more detail. It might be a print-off for you to be able to use and even talk through with your clients. Then we're thinking about elimination. It needs to go to a cellular level, and this involves the functioning of the mitochondria. Remember those mitochondria, those little battery cells within every cell. The bowels need to be working effectively. Hydration is required for all metabolic processes to be working effectively. A healthy gut. Mastication. So a healthy gut involves mastication. So that's the chewing process. Remember, it is important to chew and not just inhale your food. We require the gastric acid to be a pH of 1 to 2. How many clients are on proton pump inhibitors? And that is then affected. We require our pancreatic function and enzymes, bile function and bile salts, gastric mixing and grinding, brush border enzymes, intestinal epithelial function, and nutrient absorption and assimilation. So where can it go wrong? It can go wrong at any of those points, from as simple as lack of chewing, where we don't break down those, use the amylase to break down the carbohydrates whilst we're chewing, to the HCl not being optimal, to not producing enough enzymes and bile. It can go wrong at one of those points or all of those points. What about the gut, the health of the gut? Do you have intestinal permeability? Intestinal permeability can be caused by poor dietary choices, infections, so that's back to those parasites, viruses, bacteria, lectins within the food, stress and emotion, toxic exposure, and low stomach acid. It can cause food allergies, malnutrition, dysbiosis, molecular mimicry, toxic overload, and infection. So actually, intestinal permeability is key to be addressed in all of us. Exogenous toxins such as mercury and other environmental contaminants exacerbate mitochondrial electron leakage, hastening their demise and that of their host cells. So now what's happening is our battery cells aren't running like Duracell bunny batteries, they're running more like Tesco value batteries. What about oxidative stress and the damage caused by oxidative stress? We absolutely have to support our mitochondria throughout the process of detoxification. We need to support our mitochondria throughout the process of life. But when we're trying to detoxify our body, we need to ensure we have the key nutrients in place. This involves the coenzyme Q10s, the fatty acids, the carnitines, the lipoic acid, the vitamin C, the riboflavin, and the niacin. We want to rely heavily on that being coming from our diet, but actually do we need to supplement some of those key areas to ensure optimal functioning? Accumulation of toxic metabolites and reduction of electron transfer activity have prompted the use of antioxidants, electron transfer mediators, which bypass the defective site, and enzyme cofactors. Metabolic therapies that have been reported to produce a positive effect include coenzyme Q10, other antioxidants such as ascorbic acid, vitamin E, and lipoic acid, riboflavin, thiamine, niacin, vitamin K, creatine, and carnitine. Obviously, that would be hard going to supplement all of those, but do we need to look at some key areas? Food contains bioactive compounds. So food is information. Examples of bioactive food components include the nutrients, so that's vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, additives, toxins, and xenobiotics. And then we've got detoxification assessment. History of exposure, family history, genetic profiling, functional liver detoxification profile, digestive stool analysis, hair analysis, provoked excretion challenge, intestinal permeability test. How many of you are doing those in your clinic? Hopefully you're all taking a history of your client when you walk in the door. Thinking about their genetic history as well. Do their parents have any exposure to toxins? Did their mum have any amalgam fillings while she was pregnant with a child or breastfeeding the child? Was the dad involved in working with chemicals before the child was conceived? genetic profiling, we've covered that. It's a massive area, it's a big area of the work that I do with my clients. What about doing functional liver detoxification profiles? Do you refer them to their GP for a liver function test and a gamma GT test? Digestive stool analysis. Can you ascertain what their levels of pH are within the gut, what their levels, how their bile is functioning, so thinking about gallbladder functioning, what their levels of bacteria, fungi and parasites are. Hair analysis. It's not a big one that I do. I find that too many external contaminants can affect the results, but they do have a place. What about provoked excretion challenge? That was when I showed you those two tests on the bottom of the page, it was the left test. So I often will give my client a chelating agent. A bit like, I describe it to them, it's a bit like swallowing a magnet and seeing what that magnet can attract. So can it attract different metals to it, and then we excrete them through the body. And then thinking about intestinal permeability tests. Again, that involves drinking a solution and collecting urine, and that might give us an idea of what peptides have been passed through the urine and whether there are any permeability within the gut. Personally, I don't test much for intestinal permeability. I look at the bigger picture and take a case history and often do a stool analysis, and from that have enough data to be able to ascertain whether or not I feel that my client might have intestinal permeability. How can we help our bodies to cope with the burden of toxins? Well, we need to be thinking about the food that we eat. Most of us are nutritional therapists, and food is our primary medicine. But what about exercise? Are we moving? If we're not already, it needs to be part of the work that we do together over the next 3 weeks. What about meditation? Do any of you practice regular meditation? Is it something that people have wanted to practice previously but just never got round to it? I personally am not that good at meditating on my own. I'll sit there, put my body in the right position, close my eyes, and think. And then all that comes into my head is, oh, I just need to pop to the shop on the way home and get a box of cat food, and I need to pick my daughter up and take her here, and oh, I forgot to email that client. And by the time I finished meditating, what I did is created a massive to-do list and actually just stressed myself out. So I use something called guided meditation, where I use somebody else's voice to help me meditate. Skin. What can we do to be maximizing detoxification through our skin? Dry skin brushing, using the bath, sweating, what is it that you're going to be doing? Breathing. There you go again. We've all just taken the second breath of the day. We need to be using those lungs much more effectively than most of us are. And what about lifestyle factors? Are we going to use this opportunity to detox our diaries, detox our Facebook friends, detox whatever it is for you that you feel that needs clearing out? Is this a fast? Absolutely not. This is not a fast. Diets restricted in calories, protein, as well as those having low quality protein or high sugar content can affect the component enzyme cytochrome P450. In addition, deficiencies of specific vitamins, riboflavin, ascorbic acid, and vitamins A and E, and minerals, iron, copper, zinc, and magnesium, affect the components and activities in the system. Proper nutrition is required for proper toxic clearance. So, some of the problems that you might see with people who do engage in a fast: lack of fiber impedes fecal excretion and increases recirculation of toxins. So if you're not eating enough fiber, you're not going to be opening your bowels effectively, and therefore you are not going to be clearing those toxins out. Calorie protein restriction leads to rapid breakdown of adipose tissue, lipolysis, resulting in increased circulation of toxins. Where do we keep the majority of our toxins? In our fat cells. So if you burn those fat cells really quickly, what's going to happen is you're going to release those toxins too quickly for your body to be able to deal with, especially then if you don't have the fiber to break down, you don't have the nutrients to feed phase 1 and phase 2 liver detoxification systems. So actually people who go on a fast, especially, and in my opinion, the only people who can fast are those that are really well, and they're not usually the people that fast. It's usually the people who want a quick fix, and actually what they do is result in having more problems. Detoxification, especially phase 2, is energy dependent, compounding toxic overload. Lack of cofactor impairs phase 2 conjugation. So how can we track and assess? So what are we using during our clearing out process to be able to assess our progress? First of all, we're going to do is our BMI. Hopefully you all need to do that, know how to do that, but I will talk you through that in just a second. We also need to look at doing our waist to hip ratio. Again, I'll talk you through that in a minute. Your detoxification questionnaires, where your own toxic burden may reside, and also maybe thinking about journaling. So our BMI, it's how you work it out is your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. If you aren't able to do that yourself, then there are numerous free apps, or just Google search BMI calculator and you'll be able to log in and it will do it for you. The next thing, and this in my opinion is so much more important than waist to hip ratio, is so much more important than body mass index, because what are the downsides to body mass index? I work with some boxers whose body fat is as low as 8%, but yet are classed as obese. Why? Because muscle is so heavy. Whereas if we look at your waist to hip ratio, we can look at where that fat is distributed throughout the body. So what we want to do is first of all find those bony landmarks that we're going to use to make those measurements. The amount of times I hear people go, oh, I'll measure around your belly button. I have more than one client whose belly button is about parallel with their knees, so that is not an effective measuring tool. So the first thing we want to do is find the 10th rib. The 10th rib is the last of your fixed ribs. So as we're talking now, work your way down and find your 10th rib. Next, what you want to do is find your iliac crest. That's the top of your hip bone. So if you have your thumb on those two measurements, you want to find the midway point between them, and that is your first landmark. You want to pass the tape measure around the body and back to the beginning. Make sure that you're not breathing in during this process. When I do this with my clients, I always talk to them because it's really hard to breathe in and talk at the same time. Make sure you take your tape measure all the way to the 0, because there's usually about a centimetre of a void tape measure on there, and record that measurement. So that's the first of your measurements. The second we're wanting to find is the greater trochanter. So for those of you that have forgotten from your biomedicine days where your greater trochanter is, what the best thing to do is stand up, lift your right leg to the side, a bit like a dog would do, and you can actually feel the movement of your ball and socket. That is your second bony landmark. So now put your leg back down and take the tape measure around the body back to the greater trochanter, making sure that you 0 the tape measure. And then you divide your waist by your hips, and that is the second measurement that you want to record. Now, you're wanting to record this in your booklet before next Monday's webinar. So waist circumference should be used to assess risk and treatment response. Waist circumference along with BMI should be used to assess obesity, cardiovascular disease risk, and the efficacy of weight loss regimens. So are you an apple versus a pear? We know that with each of these comes different risk factors. So that pear is usually carrying sort of estrogenic fat around their hips and their thighs. Whereas the apple, this is where we're thinking more strongly about type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease. This is where we need to be reducing that fat around the middle. We could even have somebody with a normal BMI, but yet still has that increased fat around the middle. So what are some of the risk factors of visceral obesity? Hypertension, left ventricular hypertrophy, congestive heart failure, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, increased inflammatory response. Why? Because that fat is inflammatory, it produces its own inflammatory cytokines. So it is a metabolic system within its own right, a metabolic organ. Endothelial dysfunction, dyslipidemia, raised triglycerides. So, that visceral obesity is setting us up for massive problems. Normal BMI but high waist circumference is a risk. The authors examined the association between waist circumference and mortality among quite a big case group of men and women aged between 51 and 72. They compared with subjects with combination of normal BMI, so between 18.5 and less than 25, and normal waist circumference. Those in the normal BMI group with a large waist had an approximately 20% higher mortality risk. Large waist can almost double the risk of premature death. The risk of premature death was around double for subjects with a larger waist compared to subjects with a smaller waist. Each 5 centimeter increase in waist circumference increased the mortality risk by 17% in men and 13% in women. Waist size increased the risk of premature death independently of body mass index. So what are you going to be recording? So we've talked about BMI, we've talked about waist to hip. The next thing that you're going to want to be filling out before we begin the program next Monday is your medical system symptom questionnaire. This is where you are going to grade your symptoms over the past 30 days, from 0, where you've never or almost never had the symptom, to 4, where you frequently have it or effects is severe. And then what you want to do is total it up, looking at not just the total, but the total within each box. You also have a toxic elements questionnaire for adults. And this is for us to ascertain, where do those toxins come from, or where have they come from? What is your exposure? What about keeping a journal? I don't know if anybody's journal written before. It's an opportunity for you to write down your short and long-term goals each day, record your daily successes, identify challenges and how you met them, and it's an opportunity to stay really positive. So, I'm really struggling with ideas for afternoon snacks. So this is what I've done to overcome it. Maybe do a brainstorm in there. What are my short-term goals? My short-term goals for the program is I want to reduce the number of headaches that I'm getting. I want to increase the amount of exercise that I'm doing. Actually writing it down makes you more accountable to yourself. So let's reflect. Are you getting enough of a variety of fruits and vegetables? Are you getting enough water? Are you getting enough sleep? And are you getting enough movement? So we're setting goals now. What are your health goals? What are your lifestyle goals? Your personal goals, work goals? And what about your long-term goals? Now, because we've set them, now we've got to work how are we going to achieve them. So preparing your diary and forward planning. So our program begins on Monday the 12th. That's day 1 of our NutriClean program. And we're going to be running for 14 days. Days 1 to day 6 is where we have eliminated our gluten, our dairy, our soy, our corn, our eggs, our nightshade family, of course our caffeine, our alcohol, tobacco if it's in there. What we're doing is we're taking out all of our allergenic and highly intolerable foods. Day 7 through to day 9 are our liquid-only days. We don't have a restriction on the amount of food that you have, but it must all come in the form of juices, smoothies, soups, and of course your protein shakes, which I'm going to talk you through. Days 10 through to day 14 is when we can return to the original diet. Now during these days you're going to find that you have an abundant amount of food available to you because you've been restricted for days 7 through to 9. So our next webinar is on Monday the 12th of January at 10 a.m. And then we're coming back together on Monday the 19th of January again at 10 a.m. So what should you be doing now over the next week? Thinking about reducing your sugar, alcohol and caffeine consumption. I will really stand by the caffeine. If you are a caffeine drinker and you wait until next Monday to cut it out completely, I promise you, you are going to feel the benefit, the effects of that, and are going to get a really bad headache. I say this every time, and those that listen, thank me for saying it, and those that don't go, oh, Joe, I should have listened to you. If you are a caffeine addict, then please think about reducing it at least by half a cup a day over the next few days, so that by Monday you are in a good place to start your program. Same with alcohol. Remember, alcohol has a massive effect on your blood sugar imbalance. So if you wait until Monday, then your blood sugars are likely to crash down. Eliminate artificial sweeteners. Hopefully, as nutritional therapists, we do know the dangerous effects, know that they're not detoxified from the body, know of the neurodegenerative effects that they can have on the body. So we wanted to make sure that they're not in any of our foods. Forward planning. Think about what you've got on over the 2 weeks ahead of you. What can you do to reduce your, improve your diary, think about planning, what meetings do you have, what commitments have you got, how are you going to schedule that into the program that we're doing together. Book in some lifestyle changes, maybe scheduling a massage or an opportunity to go use a sauna. What can you do to help with your detoxification? And make sure that those foods are full of the foods that you can be eating. Make a rainbow each day. We wanted to make sure that we've got colour going in there. Each of the different colours brings different phytonutrients to the plate. Each of them have different benefits to the body. So we've got the reds, the oranges, the yellows, the greens, the blues and purples, the whites and tans. I've included all foods on there under those food categories for your reference, but not all of those foods are, of course, included within our food list. So that's why we encourage you to use the food list to plan from. That's as much for you, as a reference tool for you to understand just the importance of getting all of those different coloured foods going in there so desperately. And what about organic? Well, we're wanting to be eating organic wherever possible, always focusing on the dirty dozen. So these foods here on the left-hand side are the foods most affected by herbicides and pesticides, whereas these 15 on the right-hand side, the clean 15, are those least affected. This has been put together by the Environmental Working Group. Again, they're not all on our food list, so make sure you're working from the food list, but it's there for reference. So why would you choose organic? Certified organic means organic produce is more phytonutrient dense, no cross-contamination, no pesticides, no chemical residue. It's processed and packaged organically. Identify and remove sugars. Become label savvy. I can't believe where you find sugar in foods. It's in hams, it's in the sushi rice, it's everywhere. Don't just think about the sugar that you put in your tea. And also think about those hidden sugars. So other allergenic foods that we're taking out during our 2 weeks together: gluten, dairy, soy, eggs, corn, alcohol, caffeine, artificial sweeteners, sugar, nightshade families, and we're only using low glycemic index fruits and vegetables. So what toxins do you come into contact with in your home? So remember, it's not just about toxins from food. Cleaning products, beauty products, pharmaceutical drugs, cookware, storage containers. I know that many of these are going to be discussed on Facebook, with examples put together, so just don't worry about that just yet. What about chemical-free cleaning? I've put you together here an idea for a chemical-free cleaner. Maybe this is your opportunity to make that transition from those highly toxic products that so many of us have in our house. Top 12 deadly substances found in household products. I'm not going to read them to you. I'm going to leave them there for you to read. But where do we find so many of those? In the sodium lauryl sulfate, that's what makes our shampoos bubble up. Parabens that are in our deodorant, things that we roll directly underneath our armpits. How scary is that? Now, how many of you have thought about doing detoxification before? How many of you thought about doing some sort of clean program before and maybe start it, maybe fell off the wagon? What is so effective about the programs that we run here at NutriAdvance is working together as a team, because together we can make changes. And I guarantee you that during those 2 weeks, most of us are going to have a little time when we're like, I just want to reach for that quick fix. It might be something as simple as, a naked bar that we're used to having at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but actually we don't have on the program. I guarantee you that there will always be somebody to support you on Facebook, whether it's myself and Louise or whether it's the team. And to me, that is the most successful thing about our program, is working together as a team. So what to expect over the next 7 days? So you're going to get an invite to join us on Facebook. If you are not already friends with Louise Joyce ND, then please send her a Facebook request. She will then add you to the group. The group is being set up as we speak, so please do not all stress if you have not yet got an invitation, because it will be happening over the next 7 days. Remember, we don't actually start until next Monday. You should be receiving your food lists, recipes, shopping lists, supplement protocols, and menu planning. Now, the menu planning is just ideas. It doesn't mean that Joe says on a Monday morning, I have to have this and I really want that. It's just to give you an idea over what could make a good day's plan. Your products will be arriving by FedEx over the next few days. Some of you may have them already. And you'll be receiving your questionnaires, which we ask you to fill out by next Monday. Now remember, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. This is a fantastic opportunity to move forward, to make changes to yourself, to make changes to your clinic, to your future career. And it's also the opportunity to work together as a group, to make new friends in our field, and to be there to support one another. So that's me done. I have the opportunity to take any questions. But once again, I'd like to say I'm really excited to be working with you all over the next 3 weeks. And I look forward to coming back together next Monday, but joining in with many of you, your conversations on Facebook over the next week. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Joe. That's been brilliant. A really good start to the working year, I think, and getting everybody motivated, ready for next week. Lots to be looking up and reading on. If we go through some of the questions, then what we should be able to do is just answer some of these. I think they're all quite preliminary, and then if you are on the Facebook group, feel free to ask questions whilst you're preparing this week and really use that as a tool like Joe suggested. So if I just go through just a couple of questions. Joe, somebody was asking about, do you remember at all the website for
Yeah, I can put that. When the Facebook group's up, I'll put the link on Facebook.
Okay, we'll pop that on there. And also any reading that you've got regarding electromagnetic field impacts. Also, any recommendations for guided meditations, guided imagery? I know that you can get loads of these on iTunes for free.
Absolutely, you can. I mean, I use a lady over in America only because I did some training with her once when I was over there on a course, and I really resonated with her. But there's so many on Facebook, on YouTube, and we can definitely be putting some links on there. And please, other people, share your links as well, because other people have good ideas, and some people may be brilliant at guided meditation. So, you know, that's where we'll use Facebook as a real opportunity to share.
Yeah, and I think find one with a voice that we can really connect with, because sometimes I just find myself thinking, like you said, you know, you start thinking about your shopping list and things like that.
Exactly.
But sometimes you just start thinking about the voice itself rather than what they're saying. So just find what works for you. A question about the waist and hip ratios. Do you know if age is not usually considered as part of that?
No, I mean the one time when I saw that come up, I was thinking, well, you know, you wouldn't necessarily use that for a child who has got, you know, characteristic no hips, little pot belly in a young child, but actually for the rest of us, age is not discriminative when it comes to waist to hip ratio, because that increased waist to hip ratio at any age is a risk factor for disease.
Yeah.
So whether you're 21 or whether you're 61.
Yeah, absolutely. I think now somebody's getting a bit ahead of themselves on the materials, which is always good. Asking for a recommendation for chelating agents used for toxic metals.
Okay, I tend to use DMSA when I do a chelation test.
Excellent. And then we'll put the recipe for the spicy bean burgers, we'll pop that onto the Facebook page and make sure everybody gets that. And then Louise has put the link for the Facebook group, so you can send a friend request to Louise, and then she will add that in, add you to that group. Sorry. We've got a request here from somebody who's underweight but still wants to detox. Any
okay, great question. We have had this many times. We've also had athletes on the program who don't want to lose muscle mass. For these people, you just really need to focus on the calories going in. There are some very high-calorie foods on the list, such as your nuts and seeds. Plenty of proteins on there, so it's making sure that you have an abundant amount of food. But, you know, we've had people go through it and it not be a problem in the past. So you just want to make sure you substitute with plenty of nuts and seeds.
Yeah, I think and that's really important to make sure that people are eating enough through the program. A lot of people see it as a chance to eat less, but you still need to get all the calories in there. So
exactly.
And then a question we have here about including pea protein powder. I'm assuming the rice protein powder mentioned on the list is the UltraClear Plus pH.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you know, would you say that, like, vegetarians, for example, could include any other type of protein?
They could include pea protein if they wanted to, or hemp protein.
That's great. And then a question has been posted on Facebook is, can the lamb's livers on the programme?
As long as they don't want me to eat them with them, I don't see that as being a problem.
Excellent, that's great. So we'll get that answer posted on there as well. And then I'm not sure what that comment there is about cold-pressed grass-fed whey.
We don't put whey, we haven't got whey in it.
Yeah,
there's no whey in it.
Yeah. And the question about the webinar listening again, we'll send out the recording to everybody, so everybody will get the chance to listen to anything, to go through any notes that you missed or you wanted to listen to again, and that'll be the same for all of the webinars that we're doing, so you should get that sent out pretty much the same day. So thanks very much for joining us, and thanks, Joe, for a really great start to everybody's detox program. The second webinar is on the 12th of January, 10 a.m. So get that in your diaries, and you'll receive all the login details later this week. So thanks again, and we'll look forward to talking to you all again soon. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Sarah.